You remind us? Okay, because they printed the ballots before you all flipped, so we wanted to make sure we had the right teams in the right order.
That's done now. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now living in a world where rights are violated. Freedom of expression, right to self-determination, and right to association. We need to protect those rights, and we now live in a world where posting something online discourages you from stepping into society to hide within your shells and stop raising voices. We do not want that, and that's why we propose anonymous posting on the internet should be protected by law. Now, before I go into my speech and explain for you further, I would like you to know how we understand this motion. Firstly, allow anonymous posting means that the government will provide their users two options. One, to use a fake name, and two, to give no name at all. And secondly, this law will be enforced through websites in oppressive regimes. And thirdly, we would like you to note that mass surveillance does not exist. There's no NSA, there's no place where everyone is a suspect and everyone can be inspect anytime. The government needs a warrant to inspect a person, and the warrant can only be obtained by giving sufficient evidence in court. And so we also want you to know that internet is different from real life. Real life doesn't give you enough space to express yourself, so we should provide it on the internet. So now in my speech, we have analyzed this motion in by three stakeholders: minorities, political dissidents, and whistleblowers. I will tell you three levels of these stakeholders. One, what's currently happening, how this law will effectively positively affect them, and three, how this benefit the collectives and develop the society. Firstly, we come to the minorities. There are two current harms that is placed upon minorities. Firstly, the laws and regulations. These laws and regulations limit the rights of the minorities. You see, in Nigeria and Saudi Arabia, when you're gay, when you're homosexual, it means you're death. It means imprisonment. It means you're stoned to death. You're shunned from society. And that society pressure retained them from expressing themselves. In the Bible Belt, if you're not a Christian, you're probably unaccepted. And in Australia, if you're an African American couple, you probably don't get a job. These rights are violated by the status quo. So what does our model bring? We help them to express themselves in their best form, and we help them to associate with each other. We help them to come together without fear, to help their individual growth, to lift this fear out of their association atmosphere. And this will change the society because it allows ideas to come in. We call this the marketplace of ideas, where all ideas come in, good ideas survive, and bad ideas die. They are filtered. And so if you want the society to change, you need to have let those ideas to exist. If there's no change, there's no voice, there's no change, no society progress. We only change if those voices are being heard. So if you just shut them from, if you don't give them anonymity, they are scared, they are afraid, they don't give their opinions, there's no change in the society. And now we come to political dissidence. The current situation of the political dissidence, if you're found out, it means imprisonment, it means life on the run. You see, Xi Tao, Ai Weiwei from China, they're continuously put in political camps because they stand up against their government, their oppressive regime of China. And if severe punishment if severe punishment is the cause for you to come up for justice, then the status quo is preventing these political dissidents from existing. And so if we enforce this law, there are two things happen. Existing political dissidents, they are encouraged to give more to society. They're encouraged to bring more justice to the society. And there are people who want to serve with society, but they're afraid. So this law technically encourage them, give them the space to, serve their rights, serve what they want to bring to society. So basically, the existing dissidents have no fear to give more information to the people, and secondly, the new dissidents will stand up against oppressive regimes. This would change the society because with more information for the public, the oppressive regimes will have to be more careful with what they do. They have to be more responsible for their actions. This will help the society in two ways. They will prevent democratic governments to become an autocratic governments. They will prevent them to put more limits on, put more unfair limits on their people. And secondly, this will prevent autocratic governments to be even more oppressive to their miserable citizens. This will put more accountability and responsibility on the governments, on both democratic and autocratic governments. And now we come to whistleblowers. The whistleblowers, they're limited and constrained by job regulations, right? They can't be honest with the people. They work for public welfare, but they are constrained by their owners. If, for example, I work in an office and I don't have a husband, he died in a war or something, and I have 3 children, I cannot, and my owner is just pushing me to work for 2 long hours and he doesn't pay me enough time. And how can I survive? How can I give my children enough food if I stand up against him, I tell people that, and he fired me? How am I gonna live? And this current situation is putting fear on them from standing up against these companies, these firms, these unfair owners. And so the status quo forced these people to stay silent, and our law will help the people to stand up for their rights, but still maintain to get a living. This will change the status quo because those firms are forced to be responsible, be more careful, and those firms will stop from getting even more greedy. So now I leave you with 2 questions. 1, are we receiving enough rights? And 2, in the status quo, is it giving the governments enough responsibility? For all these reasons, vote negative. Vote affirmative. Thank you.
Thank you to the first speaker of the affirmative team.
Thank you for your speech. Good afternoon, everyone who is sitting in this room. So I have some questions. Do all websites have to make posting anonymously as an option?
As we stated clearly in the definition, this law will be enforced through websites in oppressive regimes.
So all websites.
In oppressive regimes.
And how will this policy be implemented in these oppressive regimes?
We enforce this law through websites. Websites give anonymity in oppressive regimes.
And how can it help people who's in oppressive regimes, who living in oppressive regimes?
Well, we told you that with anonymity, the minorities, the political dissidents, and the whistleblowers will stand up. They don't have to fear anything. They can stand up for justice, right?
And
that's why we're helping people to decide.
And why are the whistleblowers so important?
Well, because, for example, if I'm in a hospital, right, and I am in a low position than a doctor who is helping my husband in a coma, I cannot just, if I find out that he's using some medicine that kills people instead of helping people, and I cannot just go out and tell, hey, my name is Mary, and this doctor is, not saving people. He will not help my husband anymore. Then my husband might die. So I don't want that.
So if you will post something about it anonymously, something can change?
We allow ideas to go in. If you allow ideas to exist, there is change. If there's no idea, there's no change at all. If there's no idea of changing, then how do people, how do people know?
And in which cases government can check people?
We told you that they need a warrant by giving enough evidence to a court.
For example, can you give me an example when government can check people who posting anonymous?
Well, we just told you in the definition that we only talk about a world where there's no mass surveillance. The government needs a warrant to inspect an individual, and they have to present enough sufficient evidence.
So if this person is illegal, can government show the warrant and check these people?
Well, if their warrant is
If
sufficient
he's
enough,
illegal,
well,
can
then the government needs to prove to the court. And
Okay,
then when
so
they
in the
receive that,
Nigeria case are illegal, so government can show the warrant and can put him in a jail. Do you
well,
agree
that's
with me?
exactly what's happening in Nigeria. People go out of the street, they tell people they're gay, and they're stoned to death. So why don't you give them anonymity so they are not stoned to death when they raise their voice?
Okay, thank you.
Are the judges ready? Names carry power. Would Ai Weiwei, the famous Chinese political dissident, carry all of the influence that he does if all of his work was actually anonymous? No. His influence and his following are dependent upon the accountability and respect that he himself carries. Because we believe that this law is not necessary and can even be counterproductive, we stand on the firmest of negation in today's round. The burden on the affirmative has is to prove that this expression online will translate to social organization and change in real life. Now, there are three other burdens of proof that need to exist for the negative side, or for the affirmative side. That one, how is this policy actually going to be implemented in autocratic regimes? Two, to prove that it's necessary when alternatives already exist. And three, how will this law be controlled and stopped from being used in a negative way? Now let's move on to our main points. Our first point is that the private sector loses no matter what. Let's look at what happens when anonymous posting is protected by law. For example, after this law is created, China will continue to ask Google to give them the names of political dissidents. If they keep giving away names under this new law, then the US government and individual entities will constantly sue them, as understood by what happens when corporations break laws, and Google will lose accountability and the economy will go down. If they refuse to give away names, then China will turn to Baidu, the alternative Chinese version of Google that will give away names and addresses of political dissidents to the government, because it is the only way for such a local corporation to stay in business, and because this legislation cannot be implemented within the borders of oppressive nations. This shows that the affirmative side can't actually protect political dissidents by providing for anonymity, because other corporations like Baidu will take over and give away all of this information anyway. Thus, the only way to actually help political dissidents is to continue to support them by having big corporations like Google sustain the resistance effort that is currently going on, instead of ousting them like the affirmative is proposing. Now, our second point is that the government has no right to force a website to operate under its legislation. And there are three reasons for this. First, websites are private domains in which the owners have the right to decide the regulations and rules of such a private domain. The government has no right to legislate upon another entity's privacy or property, and because of this reason, we see that this violates the website owner's rights. Secondly, when communities collectively make a decision, such as in a forum, to make all of their names required, why should they be forced to go against their ideals? All of the members of that website clearly do so with their consent, meaning that they're showing themselves as opposed to trying to be anonymous, which leads to three, that when people online don't agree to the privacy of a website, they can simply go to a community whose website's private policy they do agree with. Because alternatives exist, because almost every forum that exists right now is in fact anonymous or can actually has an option to be anonymous, we see that this law is inherently unnecessary in the status quo. Now let's move on to the affirmative case. Now, they talk about oppressive regimes and how they're going to force websites to do this, but then they don't actually show that this can actually be implemented within the borders of autocratic regimes. What we see here is that because these oppressive regimes do essentially whatever they want to, they're not going to want to implement this law that puts a check on their power. So what we see here is that oppressive regimes will not implement this and cannot implement this only because they want to stay in power. They're oppressive for a reason, because they want to oppress their people. So why would they enact this law? It's simply because they actually wouldn't. Now, their first point about minorities. What we see here is that this idea of minorities isn't one that's actually going to be solved by the affirmative side, because there are alternatives that already exist. What we show is that because there are alternatives that people can turn to, there's no reason to make this a law. Furthermore, they state that there are search warrants available for people that break these laws, and in countries like Nigeria and Saudi Arabia, where homosexuality is in fact illegal, this means that the government is given more power with this resolution or with this motion passed. Meaning that if someone is breaking a law in Nigeria, such as being gay, if the government, they state that the government can actually go in and have a search warrant and oppress these people further. Meaning that minorities aren't being taken care of because they can get further oppressed under this status quo or under this motion in which they claim is they're solving for. Now, they talk about political dissidence and how people are jailed like Ai Weiwei. What we see here is that the only way to actually create change is for someone to step up and be a symbol. No matter how many ideas are spread anonymously on the internet, these cheapened rights don't cause the change that is needed. In the cases of all major social changes where there were always leaders such as Martin Luther King, Ai Weiwei, or even Muhammad Bouazizi, who immolated himself and sparked the Arab Spring movement in Tunisia, who became symbols that created the meaningful change that the affirmative side is actually trying to provide for. The affirmative stifles this change by emphasizing this cheap right for anonymous expression, while actually only further perpetuating the status quo today, deepening the problem that currently exists. Not being anonymous exposes the injustice of the law as opposed to just hiding it, which is what anonymity does. Now, their third point about whistleblowers is that once again there are clearly alternatives that these people can take, such as workers' unions in which they can actually fight for their rights. They can actively fight for their rights versus anonymity, which doesn't actually provide people with the rights that they deserve. Meaning that these cheapened versions of these rights, where people may be able to express themselves but won't actually cause this change, isn't something that we want. This only perpetuates the status quo because it doesn't change anything and it makes people seem as though they are, which is negative. And for all of these reasons, we negate. Thank you.
Thank you to the first committee speaker and to the government.
Hi, are you ready for some questions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so my first question is, do you think anonymity is a good thing?
To a certain degree, sure. Well,
Okay.
actually, I believe that anonymity inherently to cause social change isn't something that is necessary.
So, but you do believe that in some situations, anonymity on the internet can be a good thing?
Clarify in which certain situation.
Maybe in a situation where you want to express yourself, or a situation where you want to meet new people and you don't want to show your true identity to them.
Well, the burden on the negative isn't to actually prove whether or not anonymity is good or bad, but we have proven in the status quo alternatives already exist
Okay, but
in which
considering
anonymity
it's a
is
good
provided
thing, do you
for.
think anonymity should be protected by law?
No.
Okay, next question. Do you not believe that discussion and discourse can eventually lead to positive change?
I believe that some kind of leader has always stepped up, and there's no empirical evidence to prove that there has been any kind of significant social change in which a leader has not existed.
But if a certain situation, a certain person or an anonymous person bring up a discussion, can this lead to positive change?
No, because this discussion doesn't actually show that the law is unjust. When
I'm
someone
not talking about
exactly, but
anonymity.
when someone takes the punishment of injustice, that is when they show that this law is unjust.
I'm just
These
asking
cheapened
you
rights don't
if a
actually do anything.
discussion can lead to positive change. Not talking about anonymity, not talking about a symbol. Can it lead to positive change?
Under my framework,
So when
Not
we can
necessarily.
prove that anonymity can lead to discussion and positive change, will our model then be effective?
No, because once again, there's no need to make it a law because there are already ways in which this happens.
Okay. Next question. Do you not believe that Facebook is one of the most important websites on the internet?
That's debatable in and of itself.
Okay, so considering it's a very important website, do you think everyone should have access to it?
Well, important is subjective, meaning that people, I don't necessarily think Facebook.
Do you think that everyone has the right to associate?
To associate? Yeah, it's a human right.
It's a human right, so you can associate,
You can also
even if you're
associate-
homosexual, when you're from an African...
Exactly, but you can also associate through anonymous
so-
websites, such as all of these forums that exist.
Considering you have the right to associate, everyone should be able to go on Facebook.
That's not necessarily true.
Do
For
you-
example, a restaurant may, like, it's a right for someone to be vegetarian, but that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean that a restaurant has to offer this option just because, and this is because other alternatives exist, such as the ones in the status quo,
Okay,
which
so
can be anonymous.
we should give the minority less rights to go on certain websites just because they are a minority.
No.
We should take the right to associate on Facebook away from the minority just because they are not the biggest part of our population.
No, because they can do so in other situations.
Yeah, speak from here. Excuse me? Yeah, speak from here.
No.
Should I start? So they had three problems with our model. Firstly, they said, well, it's difficult to implement. Secondly, they said, well, credibility is related to name. And thirdly, they said, alternatives already exist. First things first, ladies and gentlemen, whether or not our model is implementable or not. We told you, ladies and gentlemen, that we're implementing our model through Western sites, which at the end of the day follow Western laws. So Facebook being located in the United States of America will follow the law of the United States of America, not of these oppressive regimes. Which means, ladies and gentlemen, that unlike in the status quo, Facebook will now not ask for your names. Thus, Facebook will not have that information with them in the first place to provide these oppressive regimes. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, what we're also telling you is, even if through some reason they do find out this information, the scale of harm that happens is reduced in our model, because the procedures that we're involving in order for you to get a warrant are now increased. So the dissidence which will be more dissidence will be cracked down in the model of China will not happen now, because we're at least reducing the scale of harm in two models. Firstly, no dissidents will give out their name, and secondly, we're placing restrictions and blockades in their way. So ladies and gentlemen, the scale of harm that is to minorities and dissidents in our model is reduced. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, even if sometimes models are difficult to implement, principle and values still mean that you implement them, ladies and gentlemen. So for example, if it is difficult for you in a country, third world country like Pakistan, to stop murder, does not mean that you give in, ladies and gentlemen. You still make those laws because you realize that principle and values are more important. With that, ladies and gentlemen, now let's tackle the arguments that team opposition brought forth to you, which is, well, the private sector has rights and you need to provide them with them. They said Google loses out either way because, you know, they at least put up some resistance. And that is what we're telling you, ladies and gentlemen. The reason why they put up resistance is because they realize anonymity is important. So if anonymity is so important, why don't you make it a law, ladies and gentlemen? Meaning that now these firms will be in a stronger position to put in resistance and actually bring about effective change, because now they have a moral principle stand, ladies and gentlemen. Now they cannot be morally and principally flimsy and get away with it. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, they said, well, the government has no right to intervene. We told you, ladies and gentlemen, that governments always intervene in the case of harm. In this case, ladies and gentlemen, you're harming multiple rights of those people. The right to expression, the right to self-determination and making their identity in a way they want to, and the right to association, ladies and gentlemen. Because if you have the most important social platforms like Facebook, etc., forcing you to be not anonymous, then it stops these people from going there and expressing their opinions, thus taking away these rights. And we told you, ladies and gentlemen, that in the case of minimum wage, worker conditions, governments always intervene over the private sector. The rights of the people trump the rights of the private sector. Thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, with that, now let's move on to our case, most of which they did not tackle. They said, well, ladies and gentlemen, you always need someone with a symbol, someone with credibility to bring about change. We don't believe that, ladies and gentlemen. If I'm arguing something and Rimke is arguing something, it does not matter who speaks it. What matters is the argumentation and the content that you're bringing forth. The point that we're trying to make, ladies and gentlemen, is that opinions in and of themselves matter, which is why, ladies and gentlemen, in previous times where freedoms were not guaranteed, people used pen names to come up with their opinions. It did not make their opinions any less valuable, ladies and gentlemen, because that opinion did have a certain value in and of themselves. Secondly, we're not taking away the important symbols of change in our model. People still have a choice to be not anonymous, ladies and gentlemen. So the Martin Luther Kings will still exist in our model. In fact, what will happen is that they will have 100, 200 other people to support them. So if anything, we're bringing more power to the movements that you're talking about, ladies and gentlemen. They talked about the Arab Spring, how it was started because someone was not anonymous. Yes, it might have been started because someone was not anonymous, but the reason why it's sustained, ladies and gentlemen, is because people anonymously communicated through Facebook, ladies and gentlemen, and other mechanisms. What we're trying to tell you is it might not start change, but it affects change, ladies and gentlemen. It sustains change, which is why, ladies and gentlemen, anonymity is important, because it takes away fear of two kinds, ladies and gentlemen. For minorities, it takes away the fear of being punished by laws and the fear of being judged by society, ladies and gentlemen, thus allowing them to express their opinions. The point that we're trying to make, ladies and gentlemen, is that on an individual level, this allows you to develop your identity in a manner you want to, construct your identity without fear of repercussions. On a societal level, ladies and gentlemen, this allows the existence of opinions which we believe does not exist in the status quo. So what we're bringing about, ladies and gentlemen, is slow change, is progressive change, but, ladies and gentlemen, necessary change. This is where alternatives exist. We believe, ladies and gentlemen, that giving them the side forums does not make any change if they communicate with people, 10 people. However, giving them these mainstream forums like Facebook, like the New York Times, like the Economist, ladies and gentlemen, is what will eventually bring about change, is what will give more weight to their arguments, ladies and gentlemen. Lastly, we talked about political dissidence. We told you, ladies and gentlemen, that we're incentivizing dissidence on two levels. We're incentivizing more dissidents to come up because now they do not fear imprisonment. We're incentivizing more information to be revealed, leads to, ladies and gentlemen, governmental accountability on multiple levels, because now people have more information of the government's actions. Not only in oppressive regimes, also in Western liberal democracies, where even countries like the United States of America are restrictive of this. So on all levels, ladies and gentlemen, we're creating more governmental accountability. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about whistleblowers. We told you how there needs to be some sort of moral responsibility, and how fear of punishment stops people from fulfilling their responsibility. So to give people rights, for responsibility, for accountability, vote affirmative.
Next, the second speaker of the affirmative team. Dennis, okay. Do you need any time?
Ready? Can you explain to me in the borders in which laws work?
What?
Like, where are laws implemented?
In countries, I guess, but like I said, the internet is without jurisdiction, making it...
Why is the internet without jurisdiction? If I break a law if I'm in, for example, Ireland, don't I have to abide by Irish laws?
Yeah, but you still can circumvent them, right? And if those laws are not beneficial...
So circumventing laws still means that you're going against it, right?
Yes, but if it means providing people with rights, then we believe then it is justified to do so.
So as long as we're providing rights, we can violate any law that we want
If
to.
you're talking about oppressive regimes who do not provide people with rights in the first place, why do you want to respect those laws which are eventually going against people's rights?
Was that a question?
It was a rhetorical answer.
Okay. Well, when you're talking about the principles and values of something, what if these principles and values aren't upheld on your side? Then wouldn't that be just another reason to negate the resolution?
Yeah, that's what you're saying. That's your burden to prove to us how those principles and values are not being upheld, because that's what we
Right,
prove.
okay. And what about the simple fact that political dissidents are going to be further oppressed under this model?
We believe it. We told you on multiple levels how it's difficult for you to now catch them as it is easy in your model, because you make it a law, thus people respect laws. In your model, when there is no law
Wait,
for
so
them,
is this law going to be respected in China?
not necessarily by the Chinese government, which already does not respect law, but at least by the website. So in our model, there is more protection from them than exists in your model. Thus, we're
Right,
building
exactly.
about.
But then what if the simple fact that these websites that you're advocating for aren't going to be accessible in China anymore?
Don't you have fake addresses, proxies? Don't you have websites existing in countries like Egypt and Tunisia, even though they were banned?
So you're saying that as long as we circumvent these laws, that's going to be okay?
As long as we bring anonymity a law, that is when everything is going to be okay.
Okay, great. And when you talk about how governments intervene in private sectors, can you elaborate a little bit more on this point?
We talk about worker laws and conditions. The firms, while have a right to make a profit, the reason why you allow them not to make a profit over the people's right is because you realize that there is a right for them to get a wage, to get proper working conditions. Similarly, in this situation, we are allowing these minorities,
Right, and what
these
about
political
the
dissidents.
notion that almost every forum that exists on the internet is in fact anonymous?
if it's anonymous, then why don't you make it a law?
Because it's not necessary to do so, and we'll prove to you the negative harms.
If anonymity is so good and you're in favor of it, then make it a law for everyone.
No. The point was that
people who don't want to be anonymous can still be not anonymous.
No, meaning that the status quo that exists protects anonymity, right? Or that it provides anonymity, right?
And
no, exactly. But then you conceded to the fact that alternatives exist.
No,
but then if we can prove to you that this law actually does more harm, then shouldn't we have the negative ballot?
Firstly, we believe that the harms that you talk about are negligible in the first place. Secondly, we never told you that alternatives are effective. We told you that these alternatives are side forums which mostly do not matter. We want them on the mainstream and they need to get their rights.
Actually, can you let us know when we have 2 minutes?
Minutes. 1 minute past. Past. You have 6 more.
30 seconds. Okay, can I start? Okay. Well, in my speech, I'm gonna talk about the next points. How there are more harms under the affirmative when we affirm the motion, when this and how this law is useless and the status quo offers alternatives, how this law can't be implemented in the autocratic regime, and how it's going to be counterproductive, and I'm going to talk about circumventing internet censorship and proxies. Okay, give a man a mask and he will show you. Okay, giving people masks or protecting the anonymous thing will result to people being less responsible, less accountable. They will just say whatever they want and do not fear any punishment, any law. And this will promote hate speech. They are talking about the rights of minorities, about how we should defend them. Yes, we are for that. But the status quo offers this option. But by making anonymous people protected by law, you are promoting hate speech. You are protecting the bad guys. You are protecting cyberbulliers. You are protecting online thieves. You are protecting stalkers. You are protecting people who are doing harm for society. Do you know how many people suicided because of anonymous cyberbullying? If we protect them, then we are promoting this kind of things. We are giving them a shield. We are widening this thing. We are promoting it. We're making it will happen more and more and more, because more cyberbullies could be anonymous and could be protected by law. Another thing, this law is useless because there are alternatives. According to their definition, anonymous means one you can use a fake name or give no name at all. Well, using a fake name is an option in every website, and almost every website. You can use a fake name on Facebook, you can use a fake name on MySpace, and Twitter offers you to be totally anonymous. And people can go to forums when they don't give their names. Simply, there are alternatives. You can use a fake name. There's no problem about it. So the status quo offers alternatives. If I don't know, the government have no right to tell me whom to invite to my house or how to put furniture on it. If I'm a website, I don't want to give the anonymous posting option, then I won't give it. You can't force me. They are private domains, and people who go to these websites are okay with giving their names. People who are not okay can use fake names or can go to websites where you can be anonymous. So the status quo offers these alternatives. So the law is simply useless. And they talked about whistleblowers, how I can't say something wrong about my job simply because I work there and I'm afraid. There are workers' unions when you can actively say what you want, when you can stand against it, and when you can have your rights. Nobody have the right to fire you just because you went to a worker union and you said your opinion. Plus, laws are geographic, not determined by the website. And if an American man is China, he must abide by Chinese law. This motion simply cannot be implemented in oppressive nations because the people still exist under the law of those nations. If, for example, people will be further oppressed, it's counterproductive. If I live in Nigeria, something, and you said yourself that if the government sees that something not legal happening, they can have a search warrant. They can, if they prove you're breaking the law, they can punish you. They can put you to jail. If something illegal happens online, the government can stop it. This contradicts their entire case because it allows the state to further oppress their people. For example, in Nigeria, being gay is illegal. So the government, they say, the affirmative side oppresses them further by giving governments unchecked power on regulating the internet. They can Now moving on to the proxy point, they said that people can use proxies. Do you know that the Obama government spent 35 million per year to circumvent internet censorship, and that China spends hundreds and hundreds more to stop it? So China will always find a way to stop the circumventing of the internet censorship. And let me here finish by quoting Michael P. Meehan, a member of BBG. If we figure out how to breach the Chinese firewall with X dollars, they can spend 100 times X dollars and divert their resources to figure out how to plug that hole. So circumventing internet censorship won't always work. People will be further oppressed. This law is useless, and simply the harms are much more to simply deny. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you to the second speaker of the negative team. Affirmative team, we have 8 minutes left.
Thank you for your speech. No, thank you. Firstly, do you believe that political dissidents create accountability upon, place accountability upon their governments?
We want to protect political dissidents. That's why we can't make this law, simply because if you make this law, then China won't only sue Google, they will make Google go away and make alternatives like Baidu, people will still be oppressed, people will be further oppressed, people will go to jail because Baidu will give names willingly. So don't worry, they kick Google out and bring Baidu.
So you say that political dissidents are good, okay? They're good. Then
they're good because they present a symbol. But the Tunisian revolution wouldn't happen if Mohamed Bouazizi didn't put himself on fire. The black people wouldn't have the rights today if Martin Luther King was anonymous.
Are those people in history, those people who are respected by people who are they are those very extraordinary people, because they're just extraordinary. Not everyone stand up for that,
Just
right?
name me one anonymous person that started the revolution. Just name me one anonymous person that changed the world. Just name me one anonymous person. Give me one anonymous example that made this world different. If we go to history, every change was made by people who sacrificed. If you are anonymous and you're sitting at home and you're fine, I won't follow you. You need to make sacrifices. People need to be impressed in order to follow.
Thank you. Do you not believe that fear of consequences is related to minorities more than to majorities?
Fear of consequences?
Yes.
Yeah, by making this law,
Then why
you will stop status
you
from fearing
believe that
consequences.
anonymity
I would be
will
more
help the
cyberbullied. There be more. You are promoting stalkers and cyberbulliers and
You're
internet
being rude.
thieves. Sorry?
You're being rude.
I'm sorry. Okay.
If the minorities is fear of consequences more than the majorities, then why don't you believe that anonymity will help those minorities?
The option is already there. If you're in a minority and you fear for yourself, then the option is already there. And if the government, according to you, can always get a search warrant and check him, then if it's illegal to be gay in Nigeria, so I will always be oppressed. I'm sorry.
Will you ban anonymity?
Why? We're not here talking about whether anonymity should be banned or not. We are talking, is this law even, do we have to make it protected, yes or no? Is it the...
Thank you.
Yeah.
But when will people express their rights better? When they feel fear or when they feel safe?
People can still feel safe.
So they feel safe and they express their opinions better. Thank you. In regimes where rights are restricted,
yes,
is
because
anonymity
the
best way to help those minorities? In regimes where rights are not given enough, is anonymity the best way to give the rights?
We are not denying the minorities their rights. They can still express themselves under the status quo. They have lots of alternatives, like we've proven. And we are talking, and we added that there are other people who can harm the society even more. And we stand here to speak on behalf of everybody who was bullied, who will be further harmed if we promote anonymity and if we free people from their responsibilities and from their responsibilities. And thank you. Thank you.
How much time do you have left?
7 minutes and a half. One minute past. Two minutes past. Minutes past. Okay. minutes passed. 2.5.
You have to pause.
6 minutes passed.
Stay quiet if you need to say these 5 things.
1 minute left. You're out of time.
I'd now like to finish up the case for the affirmatives by answering 3 questions for you. First of all, does the government has the right to interfere? Second of all, is protecting anonymity by law necessary? And third of all, will this law make a change? First, I'll go into the first point. Does the government has the right to interfere? Yes, the government has the right to interfere. When harm is being done, we can force people to do things they don't want. For example, the minimum wage. If an owner pays his people too less, the government can interfere. The government can say, no, you have to pay them more. And therefore he loses his rights, but the people gain rights. And in this situation, there are harms. Association being harmed, privacy is being harmed, self-determination is being harmed, personal development is being harmed, so the government can interfere. You say there are alternatives. You say there is consent of the people, but there's a problem, people. There's a difference between a small forum and a big mainstream website as Facebook. Everyone needs access to Facebook because here you can associate. Here you can speak out your opinion, and therefore there are harms, so the government can interfere. Your second point about this is, how are we going to implement it? How are we going to implement it in autocratic regimes? We talked about it once before, and I will explain it one more time. Websites follow the laws of the country where the domain is based. This is the current status quo, and we will keep this. So, for example, in Nigeria, if you use a website which has a domain in Nigeria, you follow the laws of Nigeria. But if you have a website who is based in Ireland, you follow the laws of Ireland. So if people in Nigeria use a website which is based in Ireland, they will not be prosecuted for being gay. You say, well, proxies are so hard to use, but we're already using them. We're using them right now. Isn't that enough proof that you can use proxies? We are reducing the harm by interfering, and therefore we must interfere. values trump implementation, and the debate is about values and not about implementation. So I'll go on to my next question. Is protecting anonymity by laws necessary? Yes, it's necessary. And why is it necessary? Because we're protecting minorities who are judged by their social environment and by laws. Political dissidents who are sent to black jails in China where they have to work 24 hours a day for more than 10 weeks. And we're protecting the whistleblowers who are constrained by job regulations and therefore not speak their opinion and therefore not get their rights. So we're protecting minorities. No, we are not protecting the criminals, because how I explained, criminals will not get their profit out of this, because the anonymity in our law is restricted by using the warrant. We're giving the minorities a chance to fight. They know that this anonymity is certain kind of restricted. So they know they can get up to them and say, I am being cyberbullied. Now you can go to court. Now you can get a warrant and stop this from happening. We could have saved Amanda Todd by this case. We could have given her parents a couple of years extra. We could have saved her. And the second part is we are providing the marketplace of ideas, but I will talk about that in my last point. Political dissidents. How I explained to you, we are protecting them. They will not get prosecuted. They will not be sent into black jails, and therefore discussion comes up. Therefore the marketplace of ideas comes up. Bad ideas are filtered out, good ideas will survive, and therefore the government is accountable. And we want the government to be accountable, as well as in autocratic regimes, as in Western liberal democracies. Then third of all, the whistleblowers. Same as with the political dissidents, we are protecting them. They will not get prosecuted. They can use proxies. They can use a website which is based in not a country as Nigeria, but as a country in Ireland. And therefore they will be protected and will cause discourse, discussion, and therefore the accountability of organizations. So we provide the marketplace of ideas. We provide accountability for as well the government as organizations. And my last point, will our model bring a change? And yes, it will bring a change. You say we need a symbol, we need a Martin Luther King. And first of all, it is not always about a symbol, it's about argumentation. It doesn't matter if Hassan said it or if Miriam said it, it matters what is being said. This is being proved. Anonymity can make a change. It's in feminist organization in America. It's happened in the Arab Spring. It happened with homosexuals. It is happening right now. That's enough proof that anonymity will work. Then second of all, we are not taking away the symbols. Martin Luther King will still exist. Obama will still exist. People all over the world will still speak their opinion on the street, but we're giving them help. We're giving them thousands more voices on the internet, and therefore this model will be so effective for providing the marketplace of ideas, because we want to move forward, we want to progress, we want to go slow, but we want to progress, so therefore we will sustain the ideas. We're giving the minorities a voice. The people who fear are giving a voice. Dissidents will not be imprisoned, but they will set the government accountable. Whistleblowers do not have the fear that they will be woken up in the middle of the night and taken away to black jails. We are giving everyone a voice, and therefore you should vote affirmative.
tasks, 2.5 left. One and a half minutes, you're out of time.
It should be an interesting experience.
You ready?
Okay, in today's game, we have a 3 clash points that can help you judges to understand that this motion is not right, and we shouldn't give the right anonymous posting to be protected by law. So the first clash point sounds like societal welfare. We have proven that if policy is implemented, more people are going to be oppressed. China will turn to a different website that will give away names and addresses of political dissidents, and our opponents agree that it is bad thing. The issue is that if this law is passed, more people will be oppressed because companies such as Baidu will replace the Google and help oppress the Chinese people by giving away names of political dissidents. If this is not the case and people use proxies to access Google, it hurts the international relations because between China and United States, because they are undermining the laws of United States, creating the tension which is bad for economy and diplomatic relations for the two nations. So people get oppressed more because absolute anonymity promotes hate speech and cyberbullying, which actually promotes crime, gang discrimination, and evil civil unrest. So hate speech exists more with absolute anonymity because there is less accountability and more people will take advantage of this. So the second clash point is going about the protection by law is unnecessary because alternative has already existed in the status quo. So the negative side and agrees that anonymity can be good, but we see that anonymity can be protected in the status quo without a law. Making a website anonymous should be a choice, not a demand. Almost all internet forums are anonymous, and one of the biggest social media sites, like Twitter, is anonymous. So these alternatives are not small sites forum at all. The marketplace of ideas is harmed because actually less people will have a voice. So the anonymity cannot be protected by law because, for one, it is bad for the society, as we have proven. So forcing all websites to make posting anonymous an option infringes upon a website owner's right. So all online communities that give out their information clearly do not do it willingly and consent to giving their information. So why force them to go against what they want? So the point is even further enforced by the simple fact that there are many websites that exist today that do allow anonymous posting, making this policy simply unneeded. So, thank you. So the affirmation gives unchecked power to the government to harass and abuse this new power, which leads to more human rights violation. So, to more human rights violation. So anonymity will be uncontrollable. The affirmative do not clarify to what extent this authority should stand. So if people break the laws, which is taboo in a country, like being gay in Nigeria, the Nigerian government can legally persecute this individual under the affirmative rule, contradicting to the affirmative case. So the claim that they are saving lives is clearly false. This law is counterproductive, leading the majority to have an even louder voice, making the minority even more oppressed. So the third speaker was talking about how these changes are taking place right now. So it clearly doesn't need to be a law. So our opponents claim that human rights should be promoted above corporation rights is correct, but they do not do this because they hurt both human rights and they concede to breaking corporations' rights. They violate more human rights because while the status quo is not perfect, thank you, they make it even worse. So political dissidents will be even further oppressed because good corporations will be ousted and bad ones will be put in place. So the burdens we gave the affirmative side are this. First, how this policy will be implemented in autocratic regimes. Second, how it is necessary when the status quo already offers this option. And the third, how will this law be controlled and stop people from using it in negative way. So, and because of affirmative does not address and uphold these burdens, we believe that negative should win. Thank you.
Thank you for this debate. Please shake hands and good luck with the next debate.
Just watch out for the table.
You're smiling to me.